Hello everyone, my name is Mohammad Nazir Ahmad. So today our group 7B, will be presenting on the topic whose data is it anyway? Privacy, surveillance and consent. So the presentation will talk about the loss of data rights, who's involved in data rights, and we did a survey on it, so we'll be presenting it, and also some reforms and also awareness campaign on this topic. So I'll pass it to the next presenter.
Analysis of Malaysia's PDPA 2010. The Personal Data Protection Act 2010 regulates the processing of personal data in Malaysia's private sector. So, here are the key features and limitations compared to the international standards like the GDPR. So, here are the key features. Firstly is consent requirement. PDPA mandates explicit consent from individuals before collecting their data. For example, like opt-in checkboxes. However, exceptions exist for legal compliance and national security. Secondly will be data subject rights. So from here, users can access their personal data held by organization. They can correct inaccurate or incomplete data. They can still withdraw consent, although PDPA does not guarantee full erasure of data unlike GDPR. Thirdly will be enforcement and penalties. Non-compliance may result in fines up to 500,000 or imprisoned for 3 years. The Personal Data Protection Commissioner, PDPC, oversees enforcement. Fourth will be scope and limitation. PDPA applies only to the private sector, for example like banks, telcos, e-commerce. Notably, government agencies are exempt, allowing unrestricted public sector data collection. And the fifth feature will be data security measures. Organizations must implement safeguards against breaches, but PDPA lacks strict breach notification timelines, potentially leaving users uninformed about leaks. So, here are the critical weaknesses. Firstly, no mandatory breach notification. Unlike GDPR's 72 hours reporting rule, PDPA does not require companies to disclose data breaches to affected users, raising transparency concern. And secondly, government exemption. PDPA's exclusion of public agencies permits unchecked government surveillance, for example, like MySejahtera pandemic data, creating ethical conflicts between national security and privacy rights.
So next we'll move on to GDPR. GDPR stands for General Data Protection Regulation, and it's enforced since 2018 that applies to globally to any organizations handling EU citizens' data, including both private and public sector. So GDPR is built on principles such as transparency, accountability, and data minimalization. There are 4 key provisions listed of GDPR. So firstly is user consent. User consent must clearly be given before any data is collected or used. And secondly, individuals have very strong user rights, including the right to access their data, correct it, and delete it, also known as the right to be forgotten. And users also get to move their data to another service through data portability. Thirdly, data breach notification is mandatory. So whenever there's any serious breaches, organizations are mandated to report it to authorities within 72 hours and inform users if the risk is high. Lastly, GDPR has strict enforcement, so violators can face penalties up to 20 million euros or 4% of their global revenues, whichever is higher, and this causes companies to take this compliance more seriously. Next, we're moving on to the ASEAN framework. So for the ASEAN framework is introduced in 2016 but updated in 2021. So unlike GDPR, the ASEAN framework isn't a law, but instead it's a set of guidelines to help member states align their data protection efforts. So it supports digital trust and trade across borders, but relies on each country to implement their own laws. And it emphasizes core principles like consent, data accuracy, and accountability, though the enforcement totally depends on the national policy of each country. Lastly, for my part, I would like to compare the difference between GDPR, the ASEAN framework, and the PDPA of 2010 for Malaysia. So, lastly, to compare this, I would like to highlight their key differences across 3 main areas, which is legal strength, user rights, and enforcement. So firstly, the legal nature. For GDPR, it is a binding law with full coverage of both public and private sectors. And ASEAN framework is a non-binding law. It's not a law, but it's more of a guideline. And Malaysian's PDPA is more of a national law, but only applying to private sector organizations. So secondly, looking at the user rights and protection, GDPR gives users more than 8 strong rights, including erasure and data portability, means the right to erase any data and to transfer any data, and any action requires explicit consent from the users. ASEAN framework recommends similar rights, but they are only a guideline, so they are applied differently based on any of the country that uses it. So Malaysia's PDPA offers only basic rights like access and correction. There are no rights to erasure, and consent can be opt out. And thirdly, enforcement and accountability area. So GDPR enforces strict rules like mandatory breach notifications within 72 hours and fines up to 20 million or 4% of revenue, which means that people who follow GDPR would take it more seriously. And ASEAN framework leaves enforcement to individual countries, which varies. And lastly, PDPA lacks breach notification and has bigger penalties compared to GDPR. So it excludes public sector entirely, so it's a little bit weaker. And through the summary, this data shows that Malaysia's PDPA still falls short compared to the international and regional standards, highlighting the need for reform.
Hi, my name is Amar Irfan. I will talk about the stakeholder mapping for this topic. So let's start with the users. These are the ordinary people like us whose data is collected through websites, apps, services, or government forms. Under laws like the GDPR, users have strong rights, including the right to access, correct, or delete their data. However, under Malaysia's PDPA 2010, these rights are more limited. For example, the PDPA does not include the right to be forgotten or data portability. One of the biggest challenges for users is low awareness, and many people don't realize how much of their personal information is being collected, let alone how to take control of it. Next, we have corporations. These are businesses that collect and process personal data like tech companies, e-commerce platforms, and also banks. Their interest is in using data for analytics, marketing, and also service personalization. Corporations are legally obligated to protect user data, but the level of enforcement depends on the country. For example, the GDPR requires companies to notify authorities of a data breach within 72 hours and appoint a data protection officer. The PDPA does not yet require either of those things. This creates a gap where companies in Malaysia may not be held to the same standards as those operating in Europe. The third stakeholder is the government. They play a dual role. One is to regulate the use of personal data, but also, second, collecting it for public services and national security. In Malaysia, the Personal Data Protection Department, or JPDP, is responsible for enforcing the PDPA. However, unlike the GDPR's independent data protection authorities, the JPDP is under a ministry which raises questions about its independence and enforcement power. Governments also face the challenge of balancing public safety, such as through surveillance, with protecting citizen privacy.
Hi, my name is Adam Iskandar bin Shanawi. So the method we have chosen for this assignment is a survey. So I will present on the survey overview. First of all, a total of 20 respondents participated in the survey, with the majority being students aged between 18 to 24. And the survey aimed to assess their awareness of Malaysia Personal Data Protection Act, PDPA, the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, and their opinions on the digital consent, data protection, and accountability. Secondly, when we asked them on how familiar they are with PDPA, the results have shown that 40% of them claim to be very familiar, but another 40% say that they only heard of it without knowing so much detail, and the remaining 20% reported being somewhat familiar. indicating that in-depth understanding is still limited. Number 3 is on the clarity of the consent. The results have shown that only 30% of respondents felt that online consent is clearly communicated, while 45% believe that it is only sometimes clear, and 20% more felt that it is not clear at all. And this have suggested that most users experience confusion about how their data is collected and used. For number 4 is the data on the support for the awareness campaign, and the results have shown that 35% of respondents supported the idea of launching a public awareness campaign, 30% were unsure, and 35% were not in favor. And overall, 65% of participants are at least open to learning more about data protection. Moreover, I will present on the accountability for data privacy, and based on the result, most respondents, which are 40%, believe that government regulators should be responsible for protecting personal data, while 25% pointed to companies and 20% believe that all parties, including users itself, should share equal responsibility. Last but not least, we have asked the respondents their opinions on updating PDPA, and based on the result, when we asked whether the PDPA should be updated or not, 30% of them said yes, while 35% were unsure, and another 35% said no. This shows that a divided opinion, possibly due to limited knowledge about the current state of the law.
So moving on to the proposed reform. So number one, what I propose is that users should have the right to data portability. So users should be able to download their info in standard formats such as PDF, Excel, and using that standard formats, they can easily switch between bank telcos without resubmitting documents, so that they have more control of their data. Moving on, so stricter consent rules. So what I suggest is that separate checkboxes for ads and data sharing so that users can choose what their data is being used for. Pre-tick boxes are banned so that ensures that user read all through the terms and condition. Next is every time the terms and condition are updated, the company must request the user's agreement. So moving on, company report cards. Large firm must publish how many breaches they have in a year and who they share data with. This ensures that there's transparency for the company and users and how the company uses their data. Lastly, escalating penalties. So repeat offences result in increasingly severe penalties. Example, so let's say the first offence is 500,000 ringgit fine. So if you the same offence is done a third time, it will go up in fines. Let's say the third offence is 2 million ringgit fine plus a 6 months operation ban. So the more you do it, the higher the penalty is. So let's move on to the next. So next is about the awareness campaign on digital rights. So number one, we should use digital tools such as video guides in Bahasa Melayu, Chinese, Tamil, so that they can educate users on what their digital rights are. And if they have questions, they can use chatbots to ask their questions. And if they wish so, they can test their knowledge by doing a self-assessment quiz. So moving on to public engagement, we can use a hashtag #ProtectMyDataMY challenges to promote awareness in the public. We can also promote viral privacy fails kits so that people can see how privacy fail occurs. And also, we can do a video competition on data protection. Moving on, workshop all around country. So conduct educational talks on data protection and your digital rights, and also offer hands-on privacy checkups for the public. So lastly is a corporate program. So corporate program, we should do a public compliance dashboard So people will trust more company when they see the company has many complying points in the dashboard. And for top performers, we can give them a badge, call them champions. So that's all for me.
Hello, my name is Sifan Hazi and I will present about our website. First of all, you are greeted with the main page. Then it will show a video about what PDPA is in Malaysia. And then it will give a summary of what PDPA is or what your right is. And there will also be an action hub that is embedded into our website, which can show tools for users to try out the things about your data rights. And then there will be a section on our currently hosted campaign, and there will also be a section for more information on our website, which showcases videos and posters relating to data privacy. And then finally, at the bottom, there will be a small section to contact us for feedback and more information.